Hello. I have just made this short video, and this one is all about the boss fight at the end of the game. And this took a bit of thinking about and a good couple of days of programming. And I started it with the idea that Max was going to have to face off against the Magpie, and the Magpie would pull off at least five different attack patterns throughout the fight to make it interesting. But also there'd be some quite clever examples of animation and movement, and also I wanted it to be dynamic, but not. I wanted it to be difficult, but not too difficult, given that the young age bracket I was aiming it at. So I've just made this little video, really, of the boss fight, but with labeled placeholder sprites, so you can see exactly what is going on. Now, the fight begins when Max comes onto the screen and he has to trigger the first element of the boss battle. And the trigger is around about here, it's invisible to the player, and it is triggered by a collision. So when Max hits box A, it will disappear and trigger the first part of the boss battle, which should play something like this. Now, for that first part, as you can see, that grey block, will be eventually replaced with the magpie flying in from the background and swooping over Max's head. And that triggers the start of the fight. And you can see the next part coming up. The next trigger should appear when a lot of acorns will fall down, because there'll be some foliage in the background up here, and the acorns will fall down, which Max will have to dodge, and that will form the first part of the attack. The second part, I will point out the triggers when they appear. You can see B here and C here. And basically, B falls down with these acorns, which are just placeholder sprites, obviously, not actual acorns at this stage. I've just used a quick sprite of the yellow shot in the game. But what will happen is that trigger B will fall down, hit trigger C, and cause something to happen. Both will cancel each other out. They're set so when they collide with one another, they will both destroy the instance. Now, when that happens, Magpie comes in with an attack from the right-hand side of the screen. Trigger D is invisible and is at the tip of the magpie's beak or head, and it's heading towards trigger E. Trigger E acts as a buffer to stop it going any further. I'm sure there is a more streamlined, effective way of doing this, but working within the limitations of my programming and what I know, this was the way I chose to do it, which was almost to create buffers. So when D hits E, it should bounce back again and destroy the E trigger, like that, which causes F to appear. F is our next one. F uses an alarm, and obviously an alarm is set to work over a certain number of frames, say 50 frames, and when 50 frames have passed by and it reaches 0, that is when our effect goes off. And in this case, we should see lots of baby magpies attack from the bottom of the screen, with a buffer each set up using the same technique as before, so they bounce back again when they hit it, like so. You can see straight away, as soon as the last baby magpie disappears off here, then two more triggers are set up, similar to the first attack pattern from the right, this time from the left, and uses the exact same technique. So I heads towards H, it will cancel it out, and then this attack should stop and reverse, like so. Now with trigger H, again, this is our second alarm, and when it reaches 0, we want Magpie to pop up from the background with a final attack pattern, and you will see another trigger here to stop it going too far off the screen. Like so. And that is the end of our attack pattern. So let's take a quick look at some of the object coding behind that to recap on what we just saw. Object trigger A. Now when the player runs up to A, it will destroy that trigger and create instance of Magpie attack pattern A. We've got triggers and attack patterns. We'll start that. The Magpie will fly over. B will float down from the top of the screen, and it's set so when B appears, it will create trigger C. So they'll both appear at the same time. When C comes into contact with B, destroy them both and set up the next Magpie attack pattern, which, as we know, having just watched the video, is the right hand pattern attack. We have the two buffers now that I talked about earlier, D and E. D will come on from the right hand side of the screen from this way, and the next trigger will be set up over there, which will stop the attack. It will destroy the instance, and the Magpie will bounce back again off the side of the screen and destroy the instance to save memory. Our next attack pattern, E, which is the one that's been destroyed, that's our buffer. F is our first use of an alarm. Alarms are, as we know, assignable a certain amount of frames, and when those frames reach 0, alarm will go off. In this case, create alarm 0 and create all those baby birds attacking from the bottom of the screen. When that happens, we want to find G is the next one. These are our baby birds, and obviously, as you can probably remember, we had above those we had a buffer each, so they would bounce back again using the same technique we've established. The buffers are called trigger G, and each of the 5 baby birds has its own object that's assigned to it, and you can see in the code there's a destroy and reverse attack. It means destroy the instance of G and just go back the way you came off the screen and disappear and destroy the instance to save memory. This is when H appears. Now H is our our second alarm trigger, and what we're aiming to do is get Magpie to pop up in the background for the final attack pattern. Object trigger I is obviously the one that will appear, I think, yeah, that will appear to stop Magpie pattern 4, I think, because we use the same 2 buffers, so it's going to come on from the left. Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. I missed out on attack pattern. Attack pattern 4 is when the Magpie comes on from the left-hand side. What we want is to set up the same 2 buffers, so it will come flying on from the left, hit another buffer over here, cancel that out and go back the way it came. And once it's gone back the way it came, that is when we can set up our final trigger, which should be H. Which should be not H, sorry. Which should be our final event trigger, which should be where it's another alarm. Yes, sorry, it is H. Getting confused. When H comes up in the background, we want to set up alarm trigger I. And when our big sprite hits alarm trigger I, we want it to cancel out and stop that final attack pattern. So let's take another look at the video. It's quite quick, so we can see all that in action if we go here and play. So there you go, that's the code for the boss battle. A quick kind of footnote on my thoughts on the boss battle. Now it's been completed. It was more to do with time constraints really, but I wanted to develop a way where Max would have to shoot the crown on the magpie to get the jewel. And I'm not really too up on how to create hit points on things at the moment. And I ran out of time. So I had to compromise and just get it to a stage where the magpie pops up, and Max runs across, jumps at the red jewel, and the game ends. Ideally, I wanted to make it so you have to give the magpie a certain amount of hits. Those 5 attack patterns will keep repeating until you have achieved a certain amount of hits, and only then will the red jewel fall off of the magpie's crown. But it's not something that I could do. I had to think about time and the limitations of my knowledge and what I could effectively do before the assignment submission. And unfortunately, I had to compromise in that respect. Something that I'm not that happy about it, but that's the way it is. I would rather hand this in and with a playable way of finishing the game rather than some code I'm not too familiar with. I'm sure I'll get to grips with it in the future, but for now, I actually think when I consider it, because the game is aimed at a young age bracket, it might be a better way of doing it anyway. Not all players will have the patience or the stamina to take several rounds of the magpie fighting you. It might be a better way for a young player just to jump at that jewel as is and complete the game that way. So it depends really. It depends on how the final game turns out and who the final target market is.